time for the last session for today. My name is Yeonmi Park from Hangyeong National University. It's a great pleasure to moderate the lecture by Dr. Adger.
Thank you.
Please welcome him one more time.
Okay, so I've actually done most of the hard stuff, so I think we can move a little bit faster. Where we got to so far was, so what I've been doing is showing you, first of all I explained to you Adger, right, which says that basically nouns can have optional arguments, whereas verbs govern their arguments. Okay? And then I said to you, Adger really seems to be true. And then I've looked at one previous analysis, which was Chris Barker's analysis. So I've written it up. So Chris Barker's analysis of the optionality of relational expressions, which is a semantic analysis where he says basically you have something that turns relational nouns into sortal nouns by binding off one of the arguments. Okay? And also what he does is he has something that turns sortal nouns into relational nouns by adding in a pragmatically general argument. And then I've given you a bunch of arguments against that. Okay? And the first set of arguments were essentially that it turns out that sortal nouns can have the syntax of relational nouns, and that comes with sort of the semantics of relational nouns as well. And that's hard to do in Barker's system, because in Barker's system, a sortal noun like cloud is not relational. So how do you make it relational? There's no way for him to make it relational, apart from adding in this kind of relation, right, which is a pragmatic relation. But actually, that's not how the semantics of these things go, right? The semantics of the cloud of the weather front, or the teacup of the queen, or whatever, I mean, the meanings of those things are not some general pragmatic meaning. The meanings of those things are specific meanings that are the same as the sets of meanings you get with relational nouns, right? And that's a generalization that simply is not capturable in Barker's system. So Barker's system is the best analysis out there, I think, of this phenomenon, but it doesn't work, right? It just doesn't work. So the coercion analysis, the coercion data that I gave you there about, you can use sortal nouns as relational nouns is, I think, the crucial argument against these. There are a number of other arguments. So notice that if you say something like, the edge is sharp, under Barker's analysis, that means you've got something of which the thing is an edge, which is semantically entailed. Now that seems true for some things, but not for, that seems true for that case in general, but I don't think it's true overall. So, there are lots of cases where we have relational nouns which don't seem to entail something which they are related to. So, for example, in 59, at this modern art exhibition, many pictures perplex the critics. It's modern art, not pictures of something, right? They're just pictures. So, or I carved the shape out of the clay, but it wasn't a statue. It's not a statue of, or it clearly wasn't a statue of something, because it wasn't a statue. Right? And so on. And then, I think the most crucial argument against taking the entailment thing to really be criterial or useful as to whether we have the argument present in the logical form are examples like 62. So with kinship nouns, if I say John is the grandmother of Mary, right, that entails that John is the grandmother of Mary? John is the grandfather of Mary, right? That entails that John had either a son or a daughter, right? Who then had the daughter Mary, right? It entails that. It's the meaning of grandmother, right? But I know of no language which obligatorily requires you to put in that entailed argument. We never have a language that says something like, the grandmother of Sue of Fred, right? Where Sue is the daughter of the grandmother and Fred is the son of the daughter. Right? We don't get that in languages, right? English, you might say, well, grammar's complex and something funny is going on, but even in languages where things like grandmother are simplex morphemes. You don't get that. You never get this. And yet, if you say that actually, grandmother has got 3 arguments, entails three participants are entailed in the making of this grandmother thing, right? You've got to have the grandchild, the parent, and then the grandmother. Those are 3 entailed participants there, and yet we never find those appearing. So deciding that entailment is actually a useful thing to figure out what the syntactic arguments of something is not going to work anyway. It was actually Chris Barker that pointed out to me this example, which was, I think, a death blow for his theory. Another interesting thing is in languages which are really specific with respect to the prepositions they use in relational nouns. So Norwegian uses 5 different prepositions in relational nouns, signifying 5 different semantic relations. So for example, in 64, we've got new picture av treet, of the tree. So with picture we get of, right? With a role relational noun like chief or king or something like that, you get I like the new chief of the town in English, but in Norwegian you get new chief I buen, in the town, right? Edge of the table, in Norwegian it's edge on the table. So for all of these part nouns you get on, okay? Colours, the property nouns you also get on. So, and then container nouns, like cup of coffee in English, you get with. So kopp med kaffe. Okay. And then part-whole relationships connected to humans, you get til. So head, til, Ola. So actually Norwegian is really cool, because what Norwegian does is it shows you that the relation is actually inherent in the preposition, not in the noun. Right? It's the preposition that's changing its form. That sort of suggests that the relation, the relational thing is not actually part of the noun. And you can see that even more strongly because you can do this coercion stuff again. If you take something like teapot and you put of van, right? So of it can be used for the relation constructed out of, or the relation is a representation of, right? So you said take av van, then that forces this to mean a teapot made of water, right? Which is obviously insane, but it's the only meaning you can get out of it, and it's a meaning that is derived from the preposition, obviously. Okay. So what Norwegian really neatly shows is that actually the relationality doesn't look like it's in the noun. The relationality looks like it's elsewhere in the syntax than in the noun. It looks like it's in the preposition in this case. And that's what I'm going to propose. So the standard view then is that basically we have 2 classes of nouns, right? We have relational nouns and non-relational nouns, or sort of ones. We have relational nouns and sort of nouns. So here it's like cloud, cat, etc. And here it's like mother, teapot, I guess. Mother, cup, mother, what do we have again? King, edge, etc. That's the standard view, and I'm just going to say that actually they're all sortal. Right? There's no such thing as relational nouns in the syntax. It's true that, like, semantically, mother, you're going to have mother. If you're someone, if someone's a mother, someone's a mother of someone. Semantically, if you're a king, it's possible that you have something you're ruling over. So these are all true semantically, but in terms of semantically outside of the LF, outside of the syntax is true. But within the syntax, right, or what the syntax gives to the LF, this relationality is not there. Right? That's going to be the argument. Okay, that's the claim. Now, do you remember, for those, I hope most people were here yesterday, because I'm now going to use the theory that I developed yesterday to show you how this works. So, if you remember, what we had yesterday is a system that has, well, I'll just write it up, lexical roots, lexical categories, merge, we have universal extended projections, we have a labeling algorithm, and we have root for a particular language. We have rooted extended projections that we can derive from this. Right? So the proposal is going to be as follows then. That actually there are, in the same way as we had like this act root that wasn't pronounced in English, right? Or that we'll have exactly the same kind of thing. We'll have a root, which is like part. Okay? Part is a separate root, and it projects into the syntax. And the thing that it projects is a syntactic category that is relational. Right? So it's the syntactic category that provides relationality. Right? Now I call that category kof, which is a Hebrew letter. Right? And the reason that I call it kof was, so it's pronounced written like this. Okay. So the reason and it's a uvular, kof. So the reason that I adopted this was actually a suggestion of Daniel Harbour's, because it looks a lot like a P, right? And actually, this is going to be where PPs are going to be, right? But it sounds a lot like K, and it's going to be because it licenses case and something, right? So it's a good letter to use because it looks like a P and sounds like a K. Okay, so the idea then will be that the part here will just mean part, but relationality will come from here. So what this is going to do is going to be lambda x, lambda y, some relation x, y, right? And that relation is going to be the part relation, right? If it could be role instead of part, right? In which case it would do things like king and president and vice chancellor and so on. It could be kin, in which case it would be something like mother, father, blah, 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 and so on. So what this does is it introduces different kinds of relation. I don't think there's that many of them. I think there's like 10, right? There's 10 possible relations we get here. So it's a very small set of, they're like light nouns in a sense, right? So we're used to light verbs. These are sort of like light nouns. Okay? And then what happens is the same derivation for argument structure that we talked about yesterday with passives, when we did the Collins view of passive, for example, we'll do exactly here. So we'll say that this is kof again. It looks a bit too much like a P sometimes, right? So what we do is we say that kof recurses, and here we have our KP. So we'll have some root down there. So let's do edge of the table. So a table here. Okay, so that's going to be K above D and and then up here we have N. I'm going to ignore the structure in the middle just now because it's not relevant. And then in the same way as we had the verb phrase in passive in the outer specifier of this, we will have the noun phrase in the outer specifier of this. So it's the edge of the table we're doing, isn't it? So it's edge. And here I'm going to leave open as to exactly how big this is, right? Because that's going to be an open question that we'll come back to in a second. So the analysis then of edge of the table, right, is going to be syntactically that we have some part root projecting one of these kofs. So at this point now we get lambda x, lambda y, edge, part x, y. And then here we've got table, right? We value, just in the same way as we did this yesterday, we value the case feature on the table of kof. Okay? So, and then how are we going to pronounce that? Well, we pronounce k valued by kof as of in English. Right? And then D is going to be the, and then the rest of this is going to be table. So semantically, by the time we put these two things, this is just a thing, right? This just means the table. Right? So semantically, we put this together with this, and we get lambda y, and then we get part y, the table. Okay, so everyone see how that works? So all we've done is we've taken this, which is, this is not relational, just says part. This sticks in the part bit here and says, now we've got a piece of syntax that's relational. Okay, nothing to do with this noun edge, just way over here in the syntax. We build up our normal line phrase like we do. We value it with conf like we have done with other things so far, and we value them with little v or whatever. And then we semantically put these two things together to get lambda y part y of the table. Okay. Then this, I haven't told you what category this is yet, but it's going to be something like semantically, it's going to be something like lambda y edge y. And then we put the two of these things together by predicate modification. Right? Like we did yesterday. So we got at the top lambda y is an edge, and moreover, y is part of the table. Right? So the meaning of the edge of the table is this is an edge and it's part of the table. Right? Now that's a different LF from the standard Barker kind of view, which says, you know, y, it says lambda y, edge y the table. Right? It's a different kind of logical form there. Right? This one says this thing's an edge and it's part of the table. Now, what that allows, there are two important things here. The first thing is that this derivation allows us to say the edge is in the sortal nouns. It's not relational. Okay, and we saw that we probably want to say that. So now we have reduced the number of kinds of nouns we have. Before we had relational nouns. In fact, we had sortal nouns, we had two-place relational nouns, we had three-place relational nouns. Now we've just got sortal nouns. So we've simplified the kinds of nouns you can have in the lexicon. Right?
So excuse me, so in your system, O, the preposition of doesn't have any meaning.
Can you say that again?
My question is that in your system, the preposition of, it doesn't have any meaning.
It doesn't have any meaning.
And the uniqueness, where does come the meaning of uniqueness? So in your system, the definite article does it have a meaning?
Yes. Okay, so the question is, does of have a meaning and does d have a meaning? Of is just a valued case feature in the system, right? So of doesn't have a meaning unless case has a meaning. I don't think it does. D certainly has a meaning. It has the meaning of whatever definite this is. Right? So most of these things have a meaning. K seems to be purely have a licensing function. People have suggested, in fact, I've suggested that actually K has a function of kind of transferring you semantically from something here, which is not combinable with this, to something which is combinable. That is, it takes you from a non-individual at this level to a true individual at this level. But that's just a guess. There's no real understanding of that. Of doesn't have a meaning, but of course this thing here, of the table, has a meaning. Right? Which is lambda y is part of the table. Yeah? So the first thing then that we've got is that we've reduced the number of types of nominals in the lexicon. The second thing is we now have an explanation of all those weird facts. In fact, we now have an explanation of all the data I just showed you before, right? Which Barker didn't have. And we have an explanation because under this thing here, we can put, as I said before, we could put kin, or we could put role, or we could put representation, right? Where that's things like statue and picture and so on, right? So that, of the table actually can have any of these rules, right? So that allows coercion. That allows coercion of these things. Now, it's funny for something to be an edge and to be a representation of the table. Just semantically, that's a weird thing to happen, right? But if you put something like cloud in here, for example, right? We have a cloud of the table, right? Then the question is, which one of these things makes the most sensible route to put in there, right? And it's probably representation works well. But we saw that we could actually coerce in various directions depending upon what makes most sense. And really, I think what you can do is basically have any of these with any noun. It's just that some are easier to get than other ones. Okay? So, yeah, so we get all the coercion data for free. We also neatly get the Norwegian data that comes out of this as well. So if we say that each of these coves is essentially a flavor of cove dependent upon which one of these things you've got in here, right? Because remember, at this stage we've already got the information as part, or its kin, or its role, or its whatever, right? Then we can do Norwegian, because we can say that the spell out of K cove, which is part, is av. It's Paul, actually. Whereas K cove, which is kin, is til. Which is K cove, which is part, no, which one is it? Rep is av. Right? That is, we can tie the pronunciation here to actually what flavor of cove we've got. Right? There were 2 questions I saw. 3 questions. Okay, so 1, 2, 3.
Okay, I have a question about constituency of that your structure. Of. Can you say like sentences like which table did you wash off the edge of?
Which table did you wash the edge of? Yeah.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
So if that's grammatical, then you move D, right? Leaving K or something, right?
Very good question. Yeah. So your worry is the worry that I'm splitting up this structure here.
And also I have another one like of which table did you wash off the edge? Is it also okay?
Yeah.
No.
In case you move that. So this one's obviously fine, right? To move to pipe out the B is obviously fine. Question is what to do about the case when you don't pipe out. This connects to one of the talks that was given this morning about preposition stranding. Who gave that talk? Yes. So that connects to the talk about preposition stranding. So, I mean, there's an interesting, and it connects to what I was saying yesterday about spell out as well. So there's an interesting generalization that the talk this morning raised, which is that in languages where you can have PD suppletion, right, like O in French, then you can't extract, right? And in languages where you don't have suppletion, like English, right, then you can extract. That's the generalization. So there's a way of doing that in this system, right, which says that in a language like French, actually, we do this. And then obviously we can't extract anything there because we kind of created a lump here and the D is not extractable, right? So you have to take the whole thing. What about English? Well, it's a good question, but what you could do is this. You could say that actually the K is a little bit more complicated than we thought it was. And it recurses and has a D in spec. Right? And then what K has above it is essentially what Peter Spinelli calls little p. So in Korean, you would pronounce the K here, right? You have K speech at the very end. You'd have D and then the K speech are pronounced, right? But in English, you pronounce it up here. So you get the preposition there. Now this is a specifier and can extract fine, right? But notice that there's no line between P and D. Therefore, in such languages, you'd never be able to pronounce P and D as a single suppletive form. So this is a way of capturing the stuff you were trying to capture without doing the phase stuff, right? But actually rather directly connecting these two things together. So that's not what I did in the book, and I only thought about that this morning when I was listening to your talk, and I thought, ooh, I can do that, right? So I'm very glad you asked the question, because now it allows me to give you an explanation for that. Okay, next question.
Well, in case of part of the table, then there are 2 kinds of root part. One is quof, and the other one is now.
Yeah, so you got lambda y is a part, and y is part of the table. Now, however, there's something extremely interesting about part, which I don't really have an explanation for, but which I think there's a whole PhD thesis to be written in there somewhere. So, you can't say in English edge of the table is broken, right? Weirdly, you can say part of the table is broken. Part is doing some funky stuff, right? Because normally you don't get to use nouns like this. So I think that, so in answer to your actual question, you know, the obvious example answer would just be to take part to be the same as edge and run it in this way. And I don't think there's any problem. It just, I mean, we have part twice. This one is syntactic, and this one is lexical. But actually, really, I think something else is going on with part, and I don't know what it is. The fact, I mean, it really looks like Jackendorf was right, and the part is a function from individuals to individuals, unlike edge, right? And I don't know what the solution to that is, but if anyone's interested in working on that, please do, because I don't have time. Not for another year and 2 months when it's not being deemed, right? But like, I think this is really fascinating, and it keeps me up at night. So yeah.
Yep. Yeah, the small question. And yeah, in this structure, when we add the relation noun, but just sort of noun instead of actually, if you have like a cat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, why? Yeah, how can we filter out this kind of structure?
We can't.
So in the case of leader-end system, you know, the root and the leader-end, they together determine the argument structure, or you know.
Yeah, but not for me.
Yeah.
So like, so the cat of the table is a perfectly grammatical sentence for me. It's a perfectly grammatical expression. The question is what it means, right? In fact, it's usually a bunch of meanings, right? To the extent you can take cat to mean something which is compatible with part, it should have that. But cat is not compatible with part, really, right? What about kin, right? So, you know, the cats of that young woman down the road are driving me mad by digging up my garden. That's perfectly fine, right? And there, essentially, we're taking the cat to be a relation of that young woman, right? Normally, that's not a real possessor, because in English, in contradistinction to what Romance linguists the world over think, in English, you know, the car of David doesn't mean David's car, right? So Romance linguists love to kind of just pretend that the car of David is a grammatical phrase in English that means David's car. It doesn't. It really doesn't have that meaning, no matter what Longobardi says. It's just ungrammatical. Well, it's not ungrammatical, but it has meanings, but it doesn't have that meaning, right? So what it does is it can have one of these kinds of meanings, right? So you can metaphorically extend it to a part, I think, right? And you can metaphorically extend it to character. And I don't think you can do car with kin, but I think you can definitely do cat with kin, right? So let's take cloud, which is I use cloud as Barker's example of a really, really sortal noun, right? This is most sortal noun, and you know, so we have cloud here. Then you can easily have my examples that I gave you earlier on, which is, you know, a cloud of the weather front, right? Where we get y is a cloud and y is part of the weather front. So actually, this system, unlike Barker's system, makes the following predictions. Sortal nouns should be able to have the syntax of relational nouns, and when you get syntax of relational nouns, they should come with the semantics of relational nouns, which is correct. Which you can't get from Barker's system, or any other system that I know of.
I still have a question.
Yep.
So if you are saying over doesn't have any meaning, then how can you make distinction between a cat on the table, a cat under the table, a cat over the table?
So I think so. The examples you gave were locatives, right? And locatives are not Koth. I mean, locatives are much, much higher up in the DP structure, aside from anything else. And I have a vague view of what locatives are, but they're certainly not these cool things. They're not relational in the same sense. They introduce a space semantically. They've got different syntax from these kinds of things. And there's a whole pile. I mean, you can show that like locatives have different binding effects with respect to these other arguments, and they just behave like entirely different things. So locatives really do have meanings, or at least something close to the locative has the locative meaning. Yeah.
Okay, I have a related question. How do you determine the preposition of there, of the table of?
K is valued by Kopf.
But it seems like, how about depend on something?
Mm-hmm.
Like here, okay, how do you?
So the point is that for these relational nominals, just like, I mean, in English we have of, basically, and that's about it, and then maybe to for path to or road to, but basically that's about it. In Romance languages they have de, di, da, or whatever, right? It's just de, right? In Norwegian you have av, til, pa, blah, blah, blah. So Romance, I mean, they're all syncretic, right? So in Romance, the spell out, so remember we're going to have K, Kof, is going to be part of the vocabulary item, just spelled out as whatever it's spelled out as, of in English, right?
But yeah, the preposition vary depending on the noun, right? Preceding noun.
No, it doesn't. It does not depend upon the preceding noun. What it depends upon is the semantics of the relation. That's what I showed you from Norwegian, right? So, and that's what you can see from the coercion effects. The preposition does not depend upon the noun, right? The nature of the preposition depends on, or rather governs, the relation that appears, right? And then the relation is compatible with the noun in one way or another. Otherwise, we would not be able to explain coercion effects. And otherwise, we certainly wouldn't be able to explain the teapot of water in Norwegian, where you use the av preposition and it forces the teapot to be made of water. Because av means constitution in Norwegian. You don't look happy with that answer, but it's I know because it's not normal, because you're like, no, it's a selectional relationship.
Yeah.
It's a selectional relationship the other way around.
But in that structure, the noun, cat, and the preposition, they're not local.
They're miles away from each
Yeah,
other.
right.
Absolutely miles away.
Now
In
how do you
fact,
capture that?
I'm going to make them even further away from each other by the end of this. This is going to have like 20 functional heads in it or something like that. Well, okay, I exaggerate something. But certainly the noun is going to be very far away from this, yeah. There is a local relationship. There's a local relationship between this, and between this, and and between this, and this. Right? So those are the things, so semantically, that takes that as an argument, right? And then semantically, that and that are essentially the modificational relationship. And this, it just has the same meaning of this. So if you run through the semantics that I gave you yesterday for my structures, you'll see exactly that it just follows the normal complement relationship. So there is a locality relationship between these bits, but certainly not between this and this.
How do you display the case without coercion?
How do I explain the case?
Yeah, without coercion.
Why is
C-O-E-R-C-I-O.
coercion?
Yes.
I'm not sure what the question is. So, I mean, the case is just the case, right? Case is just like the noun projects the KP, the K needs a value, it gets a value under spec and agreement here, like we saw yesterday, and then it's pronounced as of. So case-wise, there's nothing to be said. We'll see in a little bit that actually English allows you to leave this uncased in this position, and then it raises to a higher D position, giving you the table's edge. Excellent question. So one there, then one there, then one there. You're always just a little tiny bit later than everyone else.
Does your theory predict there's no coercion within verb phrase? I mean, within verb and...
My theory doesn't predict anything about verb phrases as yet, right? Because, I mean, it really doesn't. One, because I'm not quite sure what the empirical effect is and what coercion would mean. In terms of argument relations in verbs, so this is things, I mean, coercion in verbs, I guess, is just things like the amoeba fainted, right? Where fate this depends on how Borerian you want to be. So if you want to be very Borerian, you could take the verb siren, for example, and you can put it in a whole range of possible structures, right? You can say, the car sirened down the street. You can say, the car sirened me out of my room. It was so loud. You can say, I sirened to make myself heard. So you can use it in transitive, resultative, causative, different kinds of structures, right? So if you're being Borerian, you can say that actually virtually any verb is coercible into any structure. So I would happily do that. I mean, that's completely consistent with what I say here, right? There is one little issue with the Borerian view, which is I've never understood, and Hagit has never been able to explain to me, why you can't causativize unaccusatives true, like arrive type, appear type unaccusatives, which seems to be true. You can't say John appeared Mary, or the cat arrived the dog, right? These are bad. So there has to be something that distinguishes that from the cat baked the cake, whatever, the cake baked, right? So there has to be something that distinguishes those, and that looks lexical. I don't know what I do there, but here I'm not really even having a selectional relationship of any sort between them, right? So I'm having the same problem that Hagit has, in as much as when we say the cat was the table, it's very hard to construct a meaning for that. But I think it's possible to construct a meaning for that. I don't think it's ungrammatical, because you can say the cat of the young woman, right? So if I can take table to be something that can possibly bear kin to cat, then I can do that, right? It's just the table is not something that can bear a kinship relationship semantically. So I would say syntactically that's fine, but it's ruled out because basically it's crazy, right? That's what the system says. Okay, other questions? There's one up there and then.
I'm relating your answer to Professor Moon's question about the cases of the cat of the table or cat in the table, whatever, things like that. So your answer to her question was they are not a proposition, right?
The cat under the table.
Yeah.
Yes.
On or under. Mm-hmm. But what about in Norwegian?
Paw is not locative.
They are never used. No,
they are. You have a syncretism. It's incredibly common to have syncretisms in prepositional structures across languages. The Romance case I gave you is one point, right? For every kind of possible thing you could have. Or look at, for example, Hawaiian, where there's like 3 prepositions in the whole of Hawaiian, right? That cover the whole range of prepositional concepts. Really common to have syncretism across prepositions. So in that case, paw in the part of meaning in Norwegian, and paw in the cat on the table use in Norwegian are just syncretic. There's a very interesting research project which I haven't carried out, which is to ask the extent to which the syncretisms in prepositional meanings live on the hierarchical relationships between the prepositions, right? So that's an interesting question, a sort of nanosyntactic kind of question that I've not really addressed. But that's what I would say.
My impression is somewhat really surprising. You have different structures for VP and closer structure.
Indeed.
Yeah. So any consequence for
everything? Yeah. So the story says. So that's why I started off with remarks on nominalization, which says everything is parallel, right? I'm saying no, it's not. Right, so, it may get parallel again, depending on what we think about VPs, right? But broadly, I think that there's no reason for the extended projection of nouns and the extended projection of verbs to be identical to each other, which is kind of the standard view. Standard view is that they're basically identical. One involves event variables and one involves individual variables. I think there's a lot to that, but I think that we don't have, for example, the equivalent of a relative clause in the VP, right? Like as a VP modifier, right? We don't have something which abstracts over an event variable in a clause, creating a relative clause out of that event variable, and then you use that to modify the...
Probably non-restrictive.
Sorry?
Non-restrictive relative clause.
No, I'm just saying that, like, we have relative clauses in noun phrases, right?
Yeah.
We don't have relative clauses in verb phrases. We just don't have relative clauses in verb phrases. Because we can abstract over nominal variables, somehow, we can't abstract over event variables. Mystery. Mystery under the parallel view of things. Not mystery under the view of things where they're not parallel. So I just think there's lots of good reasons to take them not to be parallel. I mean, it's not like they're entirely different, right? So I gave you this structure, this kind of structure, for the introduction of agents and bi-phrases and verb phrases, right? So yesterday we looked at the analysis of passive, and I gave you a structure that looked very much like this. It had be here, and it had pass here, but otherwise it had the argument, right? So by John, it had John here, and the verb phrase here. That's very, very similar in terms of broad structure to this. So you might say, but here's something that's different, I think. We don't ever get the introduction of an argument inside a noun phrase in the same way that little v star introduces arguments inside a verb phrase. So I don't buy the idea that I have in chapter 7 of my textbook. Anyway, I don't buy any more the idea that, for example, subjects appear in spec little n. Right? This is good. I'm not getting questions.
So in your system,
It's the moment I put an analysis up, I was like, ooh.
so the case of edge of table, edge and of table combined with predicate modification.
Yeah.
So does this mean so edge is optional? Because
That's a great question. No, that's a great question. So I'm going to answer that question by saying that what we get up to here is a little thing that marks definiteness. Okay? So definite. And then above this, up here, we have D. And there's an obligatory relationship between these two. An obligatory checking relationship between these two universally, which causes this to move into D. And actually, sometimes it just causes it to move. Right? So, yeah, because otherwise, it's like, well, why bother having that there? Right? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, you would imagine you should be able to bind off this lambda y with some d or something like that, right? And that would be the wrong-headedness of the dp. So, so the solution I have to that, and I think it's independently motivated on the basis of what definiteness is to say that the size of this thing is really something which encodes definiteness, and then moving this to here is actually what gives you, I mean, that's what licenses you to be able to say the. Def in D is pronounced as the. In the same way as K in Kof is pronounced as of. And K in D, we'll see, gets pronounced as genitive. So the system altogether kind of works as a whole, but it's a great question. Yeah. There was another question there somewhere. No? Here's, yeah, it's solved. Excellent. Even better. Okay, so what do I want to say next? Oh yeah, one question you haven't asked me is, what about those cases where actually in many languages, many of them are polysynthetic languages, where actually you obligatorily, for at least kinship nouns, have to have the argument there, right? So I've given you an example of a handout from in 85 from Creek, which is a American Indian language, not Cree, but Creek, where posse, which is the word for grandmother, needs to agree with some possessor or other, like first singular, or third singular, whatever. You just can't say posse. You have to say my grandmother, your grandmother, his grandmother, right? It's just weird, you have to say it. And I get, so you might say, but hang on, in your system, you allow them, you know. Oh, I haven't explained to you why Ogre works yet, have I? Let me do that first. Sorry. it's kind of obvious, right? So with Ogre, right, the optionality generalization, the optionality generalization for relational expressions, right? I mean, there's just no reason to put this coef in, right? I mean, in the same way as I could decide to have a singular noun as opposed to plural noun, in which case I wouldn't put in plural in the functional structure, right? I can have, so, and then I just say the cat, or I can make the choice to say the cats. It's exactly the same here. I take cat here, right? And I can make the choice to project a piece of functional structure that will give me a relation or not. Because effectively, this goes back to this being a modificational relationship, right? This is a modificational relationship, so everything will run through perfectly well without putting this in, right? So basically, because this is a modificational relationship here, we get the optionality of all arguments of a partly relational nouns. So in the same way as you get the optionality of the biphrase and the passive, right? So there you get, again, predicate modification, but it's predicate modification of events. Here it's predicate modification of individuals. So in that case, this def would just hit D directly, and there would be nothing to worry about. So the optionality generalization for relational expressions arises because, in terms of UG, the way you give an argument to a relational noun is through this kind of system. You use one of these coefs, but there's absolutely no, I mean, you could just decide not to, right? In the same way as you could decide not to pluralize a verb, or not to add an adjective to a noun, or whatever, right? Did I say pluralize a verb, pluralize a noun, right? Or make a verb finite or non-finite, right? I mean, you can just decide, you're a human being, you can just decide what you want to talk about, and since the derivation of this will run through absolutely fine without this in it, you can put it in or not. Okay. That's not true for verbs, on the assumption that, well, I mean, it might be true for passives. If you do this with verbs, it's true for verbs as well, right? So if you do the passive, right, then you could just miss out this whole chunk, everything will run through fine, and you'll get the cat was kicked, as opposed to the cat was kicked by Mary, right? Not true for when you would have an active sentence, where actually what you've got is a little v star. In that case, if you project the little v star, right? If you don't project the little v star, the rest of the derivation won't run through because you'll have essentially a set of events, right? But you won't be able to do event identification to give rise to the right thing that you need to build the rest of the sentence with. So it's the different modes of argument introduction that allow you to say that some are obligatory, which are the ones that involve events effectively, and some are not obligatory. So that's how Ogre works, right? Ogre works kind of just by saying this is a modification relationship. Okay, what about examples like 85 then, with the cases in Creek where you have to say someone's grandmother? Okay, well that is not the case. You have to say someone's grandmother actually in Creek, and in all of these languages. What you have to do is that grandmother is a bound morpheme. So morphologically, you better project something which grandmother can have as its agreement affix, right? So you don't get to say John grandmother without an agreement marker on grandmother. You need the agreement marker on grandmother, right? So in all of these cases, it turns out that these kinship nouns are bound morphemes. That could very well be because of the thing I said to you before, where kinship nouns have this identify me feature on them, right? So it's very easy, since that's true, right, in general, then what languages do is they just say, oh, I can just make this bound and always have the identifier in there. But that's just an issue of, the design of the particular language. Right? So I think those are not counterexamples. Okay, where are we at? Okay, do you have any more questions before I go? I can't really decide whether to, I'm actually gonna, how much time do I have? 20 minutes, excellent. Okay, so let me skip the complex event nominals here, and briefly sum up, and then I'm actually going to start on the bit I thought I was going to say, which is the typological stuff, because I think that's really interesting, and it will connect to some of the questions that people have been asking. So just basically to sum up this part on relational nominals. So page 12. So with respect to this ogre thing, I first of all argued that the difference in optionality was real. I argued that the Barker type shifting approach wouldn't work. I then said, oh look at this other mode that we've been developing for the last few days, using predicate modification. This has this dual-rooted structure, okay? And given that it's got this dual-rooted structure and it's a modificational relationship, we derive the optionality generalization straightforwardly. Okay? We also derive the coercion effects that we saw, and we have at least a structure that is reasonable for dealing with the prepositional specificity effects as well. So I think this is a real improvement on the only other analysis of relational nouns that's around, actually. Okay, what I want to do next is address the question of the size of this. Okay. So I'm actually going to go on to the next handout and start it off and see how much we can get done. Because I'd quite like to do. Let me leave that up here. I'd quite like to do a few bits of it. Okay, so remember, going back to the general theory, one of the points is that there's a non-local thief assignment that's possible, right? So actually, in the system that I've developed here, it could be either a bit non-local or very non-local, right? So you could say, for example, let's keep with nouns. If we have something like edge, actually, let me look at that. Let me do. So if we have edge, we could say that we project up to an n, okay? And then here is where we can have the coast stuff. So that really, this is still pretty heady, right? I mean, it's not very much structure here. There's coast. That's KB, I guess. So that's just that structure there. We could just project up a little bit, right? And then this doesn't actually look massively different from the Chomsky 1970 structure, right? Because sort of we've got the head there, and we've sort of got an XP there, right? And then we've got some stuff above it, which isn't exactly what he says, but it doesn't look massively different, right? However, I pointed out that my system allows this, and this was your question as well, allows this actually to be rather large, right? This is a specifier, so it can have loads of stuff in it. So what I'm going to argue is that actually it can have a whole pile of things in here. It's not just up to n, but it can go up to at least, the kind of stuff it can have in here is at least things like adjectives, okay, and probably numerals, and something marking definiteness. So that actually there's a whole pile of things in here. Okay. Now in English, you can't really see that, right? So in English, you imagine we have something like, the three big edges of the table, the three short edges of the table, or something like that, right? I mean, that would just fit that perfectly well, but it doesn't seem very perplexing. However, under the other analysis, right, the other proposal, which would be like this. We could say, well, actually, that's really the adjective is here, and then the numeral is here, and so on. That would still give us three big edges of the table, right? So English is not a particularly good language just to see directly what's going on here. However, imagine we had a language where the adjectives come after the noun. Okay. Well, this system here predicts that we should have noun followed by the adjective, maybe the number, and then the prepositional phrase. So we'd get edge, long, of the table. This system here predicts that you would have edge of the table, and then this is up here. So whatever we do to get the, maybe this is just on the other side, and we'd expect to get long. Right? So in this system, where we have a big specifier here, we predict noun, adjective, prepositional phrase. In this system, putting aside movement operations might be taking place, maybe we move things around, what we predict, if we just do this in terms of headedness, is noun, prepositional phrase, adjective phrase. Right? So if all we're doing is swinging the tree around, right, then that's kind of what we expect. It turns out, looking across languages, that that's not what we find. So have a look at the next handout, PP peripherality and nominal syntax. So this is just what I said on what I just said here, but said more easily. So there's a generalization which I'm going to argue holds across languages of the world, which I'll call PP peripherality. And it goes as follows. When AP modifiers and PP complements both occur to one side of a noun inside a noun phrase, the prepositional phrase is separated from the noun phrase by the adjective phrase. Right? So that is what we get across languages is NAPP. We get PPAN. And what we don't get is NPPA and APPN. Korean counterexample, please. Right? So there are some counterexamples to this, but they're almost certainly because the adjectives here are really relative cases, not adjectives. We'll maybe come back to that. But broadly, that's what we find. Okay? And in the classical analysis, right? The classical analysis, it says they've got N, PP, AP. Right? That's kind of unexpected, right? Why is that? Because if this AP is just on the other side of here, we'd expect to get NPP, AP, but we don't get that, right? If we swirl everything around, we expect to get this, APPN, but we don't get that. Okay. So the standard analysis of the way looks like the Chomsky 1970 analysis has to deal with these effects through some kind of movement operation. Okay? In fact, the standard approach to dealing with these cases is to say it's head movement up to some higher position. So I'm going to first of all show you that this is that this generalization holds. Then I'll probably only get there today. Then I'll show you this is wrong. That the head movement analysis is just wrong, right? Which suggests that structure is just wrong. Under my structure, the one that we've got here, we don't run into that same problem, right? Because what we're saying is that AP and N, I'm not drawing my structures now, but AP and N are some constituent, and that the PP is outside of that constituent, right? For me, it's really AP and PP, right? But you see that broadly the constituency is just different. In my system, the AP and the N are able to be a constituent to the exclusion of the PP. Right? Which allows a very neat characterization of this. Look, the AP and the N are constituent to the exclusion of the PP. The AP and the N are constituent to the exclusion of the PP. That's not what happens in the standard view. Right? In the standard view, the NP and the PP are constituent, right, to the exclusion of the AP, which we expect you to, or you can do that, and that, but these are not found. So that's the PP peripherality generalization, right? Which is weird on the standard view and very straightforward on my view. Okay? All right, so keep an eye on my time. We've got 10 minutes.
Yeah, 8 minutes.
8 minutes, all right. So I'm going to just run through some examples so you can have some cool data. Let's go home. Oh, yeah?
So I have a quick question about the APPN order non-existence of vowels in Korean may be related to the ban on left branch movement, because in Korean the adjectives as a modifier must be adjacent to its modifiee line. So if it's separated.
This is all languages. right? I mean, so the claim here is not about Korean or English or anything. This is true of every language. That's my claim. Right? So, I mean, there may be particular analyses in Korean or in Hindi or in Navajo or whatever that make you say, well, that's sort of not relevant here because there's independent things going on. Right? But the point is that this is going to be a claim to be true for everything. Right? So, you can make an argument that it's, well, you don't need it for Korean because of X, but that's not the same as saying it's false. Right? Right, so the claim will be that this is just true for all languages. Does that make sense? Let me run through some. So I'm going to take you through some head initial languages quite briefly, and then I'll leave you with that data to consider it. And then tomorrow we'll come back and we'll finish off with this stuff. Right? I think I might even be able to finish. Well, I won't be able to do the last 2 lectures, I promise, but I might be able to finish the book, which will be quite good. Okay, so. For head initial languages, then, the generalization, the half of the generalization that's relevant is that when N precedes AP and PP in the extended noun phrase, the order is N, AP, PP. Okay? So I'll give you an example from Hawaiian here, and I'll just skip through these quite quickly. So, maka maka au ike ki inui oke kumula au. We did a whole class on Hawaiian in my field methods course. We had a Hawaiian speaker in every week, so these are from him. So basically this is picture of the tree, and you can see you get picture big of the tree. Okay? Color, new of the room, edge, long of the table. I'll stick with the edges, right? And in Hawaiian, it can't go the other way around. So in Hawaiian, you can't say the edge of the table long, right? So this is unpractical. Right? Edge of the table long. It's only long, edge long of the table. It's true also for possessor. So it's a prepositional possessor in Hawaiian. So I like the eyes blue of David, okay? And it's eyes blue of David, not eyes of David blue. I'll skip 16 to 18. I might come back to those later on when they become relevant. Romance, we know this is true for romance. So you get, this is Spanish, right? So in 19, me gusta la foto. Spanish pronunciation is suddenly got the wrong intonation to it, right? Me gusta la foto grande del árbol. So I like the picture big of the tree, or the color new of the room, or the edge long of the table. You can actually, in Spanish, have this order, NPPA, but only when you focus the adjective. Right? So you can say 22, me gusta la foto del árbol grande. Right? And it's actually ambiguous. It can mean the big tree, but it can also mean the big picture, only if you focus the adjective. So I'm not going to be interested in the focal orders here. I'll assume the focal orders emerge because of something else. Right? So I'm really interested in the core orders. So Semitic, we find the same thing as we find in Romance. So Ani oched ha-tuna ha-gudula shel ha-eitz. So I like the picture of the big of the tree. Okay? Or 26, the edge, the long of the table. And we can again put the adjective at, like in Romance, put the adjective at the end, but only if it's focused or heavy. Celtic is what I'm going to actually focus on most of the time. So I'll just give you a basic set of data here. So in Celtic, this is the language I know best, right? So you're going to get a lot more information about this than you do about the other ones. So in Celtic we have NA order. So this is Scottish Gaelic. So Hu Mor Bria Du Alpanach, right? A dog, big, beautiful, black, Scottish. Okay. So we see that this is in this kind of Cinque order, right? You know, size, it's almost in this Cinque order anyway. Size, quality, color, provenance. Right? We can also have the PP in there. So this is a possessive PP in this case. So Anjalav Mor Bria Javadi, the picture big, beautiful of Mary. And we can't have the PP next to the picture. So it's not possessive actually, it's the representation of that. Anjalav Javadi Mor Bria. So this works like Hawaiian rather than like Spanish, in as much as there's no focus available inside the noun phrase. You can't move anything after the prepositional phrase. Gallic also has another kind of PP possessive thing that Romance, a little bit like the Romance cases, but it uses at rather than of. So, Anjala Morbria ek Madi, the big beautiful picture at Mary, and so we get picture big beautiful, and then the PP again. Okay? And again, we can't put the PP in front of it. And I'll skip 37 and 38, we'll come back to them later on. And 40 and 40. Okay, so the standard analysis of this. Has anyone got a tissue? I just filled a bit of water here. It'll be fine. It's only a tiny bit. I just don't want anything to destroy the computer. Okay, that's fine. And does that mean you're fit to finish? Yes. Okay. So let me just leave you with the Trine 44, and you can think about that overnight. So basically, the Trine 44 is the standard analysis of these cases in Romance and in Celtic, and it basically says you've got the picture of Mary is a single constituent, so it's the standard analysis. And then what we do is we put big above that, and then we raise the noun up into a higher position. Okay, and that's why we get NATP order.
So the last comment, I think your system works. Your system seems to work well for Korean as an insistence of head-of-final language.
Yeah, so
actually the reverse order.
So that, I mean, it works very, I'll talk a bit about head final languages at the end. I have some examples from...
Yeah, PP, AP, N.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
which is a mystery, right, under the standard view. Yeah.
Quite well, so.
Yeah. I know. All right, so with that happy thought in our minds, why don't we finish for today? And then we'll come back to this tomorrow when everyone's feeling a bit fresher. I wanted to get through a bit of the data just now, just so you could see what we'll be talking about tomorrow, and also because it might give you a chance to actually finish the whole thing by tomorrow. So, thank you for listening.
Thank you. Well, I guess today is another long day.
Yeah.
But it's been worthwhile to be here for all of us. Thank you. Let's give him a big applause one more time for his. And we are having a reception right after this one, so please be there. Where?
Where is the faculty building? If you don't know, then you need to type a large group. It's the building.
학달에 똑같이 점심 먹은데.
Oh, yeah, it's the same place as you get lunch. And they're playing food, top line of people. And they're continuing your syntax question. Like,
yeah,
buffet, buffet.
Yeah,
all
very
you
good.
can eat.
Sure.